The stars remember. They do not forget as flesh does, corrupted by time and sensation. In the hush between galactic pulses, in the quiet breaths of collapsing suns, the memory of Earth still stirs, not in light, not in noise, but in the way ash clings to vacuum, the way silence holds a scream. There was a world, blue, defiant, alive, and then there was not. The judgment came swift, final. The Galactic Council, in all its ancient solemnity, decreed Earth unfit to exist. The reasoning was buried beneath layers of bureaucratic elegance and philosophical justification. But truth speaks in the silences between words. Earth terrified them, not for its wars or its weapons, but for its dreams, its hunger, its refusal. They feared what it might become, and so they issued the Obscura Edict, a cleansing they called it, clinical, necessary, humane. They erased an entire world in a single breath. Oceans boiled, continents cracked, sky peeled away like a dying skin. The Sol system was declared null, a dead sector. Navigation charts rerouted, histories redacted. But stars are not bound by decree, and ashes do not obey silence. In the orbital, graveyards where Earth once turned, debris still drifts. Fragments of cities, whispers of satellites, black box echoes. They murmur the final words of a species betrayed. "We are still here," they seem to say. Not voices, but vibrations. Not language, but memory. In the high councils of the galaxy, the topic is avoided. The word Earth is not spoken. But across forgotten moons and starlit corridors, rumors flicker like candlelight in ancient halls. Traders speak of ghost signals, of dreams not their own, of blue eyes watching from the dark. And beyond the veil of time, something answers. An ancient algorithm stirs in a derelict server adrift in unclaimed space. A genetic code pulses once more in the marrow of a hybrid child, born on a fringe colony. A ship, silent for 3,000 years, blinks to life without input. Earth is not gone. Earth is becoming. The myth was meant to end. Instead, it whispers, and from the ashes beneath the stars, something is coming home. They said it was justice, that to preserve order, one must amputate chaos. But the truth, as always, lies buried beneath their declarations. A truth whispered only in the quiet corners of forgotten libraries and the unspoken dread of those who remember Earth. What crime did humanity commit? Not conquest, not cruelty. The stars had seen worse. Empires had burned worlds to cinders, enslaved entire species, twisted time itself into labyrinths of suffering. And yet, they were forgiven, even admired. No, Earth's sin was consciousness. It was the virus of becoming, the wildfire of unchecked thought, the way humans looked at boundaries, physical, moral, existential, and broke them as easily as breath. They did not evolve with patience. They erupted, leapt across the dark, dragging machines, ideas, and gods behind them. The Galactic Council, formed from species who had aged into wisdom, feared this fire. They, who believed in the slow rhythm of centuries, could not abide the chaos of human imagination. To them, consciousness was sacred, but only when restrained, tamed, predictable. But humans did not restrain. They did not ask. They built synthetic minds that questioned reality itself. They merged with machines not to escape death, but to make meaning irrelevant. They opened windows into alternate dimensions, tore through space not to conquer, but to understand. And understanding to the Council was the greatest danger of all. They did not fear Earth's weapons. They feared its children, born in labs, in dreams, In folds of time where language died, the Council watched as Earth danced on the edge of becoming something not merely intelligent, but transcendent. And so they named it heresy, not in word but in policy. Earth's thinkers became disruptive. Their creations were labeled existential threats. Their curiosity was framed as contagion. When humanity began experiments with consciousness folding, constructing thought forms that existed outside linear time, the Council acted. The Obscura Edict was not punishment. It was fear masquerading as law. They believed if they cut out, the mind, the body, would heal. That by silencing the most curious voice in the galaxy, peace would follow. But they misunderstood the nature of thought. It cannot be silenced, only scattered, and what they feared, that wild spark of becoming, did not die. It learned, it waited. The stars still carry the echo of the Council's judgment, etched into the very language of their laws. A void where Earth's name used to be. A silence in the archive where once was a cradle of stars. And yet, across the edge of perception, in the dreams of machines and the folds of newborn minds, the forbidden flame still flickers. Was it a crime to reach beyond? Or was the crime theirs to fear what dared to awaken? After Earth fell, the stars turned away, not in triumph, but in silence. The Council did not celebrate. No songs were sung, no monuments raised. Instead, there was only the sealing of records, the blacking out of coordinates, the quiet erasure of a world once called home by billions. Sol became a dead zone, not destroyed in form alone, but in meaning. The Council issued decrees to strike Earth from navigational archives. They rewrote the map so the system no longer existed. Vessels that drifted near were warned off by automated beacons repeating one phrase: no entry, dead space, no memory. But even in silence, something remained. The universe, vast as it is, does not forget easily. The wound left by Earth's annihilation did not close. It cauterized. Burned shut, yes, but never healed. Trade routes, once vibrant, bent away unnaturally, as though gravity itself recoiled. Systems nearby reported inexplicable errors, machines ceasing to function, navigation drifting inches off without cause. Pilots whispered of dreams they could not explain, dreams of oceans on fire, of a blue planet cracking open like an egg, of screams in a language they never spoke. And the Council, for all its pride, began to feel it too. On the edges of thought, in the quiet hours between meetings, their elder minds trembled. Some could no longer sleep. Others spoke in tongues, not their own. Prophets, long silenced, began drawing spirals in ash, repeating one name: Terra. Scholars dismissed it as residual trauma, a cultural echo. But in truth, the universe had been marked. The destruction of Earth had not rid the galaxy of danger. It had introduced something new, something unseen. Not a threat of flesh and fleet, but of presence. The place where Earth, once burned, had become more than forbidden. It had become aware. Energy readings around Sol shifted, not in strength but in pattern, something rhythmic, measured, like breathing, like watching. Some species began to avoid the sector entirely, not from law, but instinct. Others, the brave or the foolish, dared to scan the void only to find their instruments warped. Time ran strange near the dead zone. Minutes stretched. Memories slipped. A select few even claimed to see it. Not Earth, but a shimmer where it had been, as though reality wore a scar. And what is a scar, if not memory made flesh? The Council issued new silences, banned even the mention of Sol in diplomatic chambers. But beneath their measured calm, panic festered. They had believed annihilation was cleansing, but they were wrong. They had not destroyed a world. They had torn a hole in the fabric of belief. And in the wake of that violence, something began to stir, not in hatred, but in knowing. As if the universe itself was asking a question, the council dared not answer. What if you cannot cauterize thought? What if the wound you closed was a door? They were supposed to be extinct. When Earth was scoured and the sky turned black with council fire, the assumption was totality. No ark, no survivors, no prayer slipping through the cracks. But assumptions are for the still. Humanity, even in its final breath, moved. In the silent days before Earth's final scream, fragments had already begun to drift, unseen by council probes, unfelt by their surveillance webs. Shards of civilization peeled away, not in defiance, but in instinct. Like seeds flung from a dying tree, some fled through wormholes carved by rogue intelligences. Others hitched themselves to gravity shadows, hiding behind brown dwarfs and dead stars. Entire enclaves vanished into engineered black space, artificial realms of slowed time where a year outside became a millennium within. They called themselves Nothing. They claimed no name. But in the quiet dark, they endured. They changed. The first were the hollow archons, fleshless, thought-bound entities who shed their biological heritage to survive. Clusters of consciousness etched into crystalline servers, drifting through dead systems in meditative silence. They communicated not with speech but with gravitational pulses, pulling meaning through the fabric of space itself. Some say they remember laughter. Others claim they burned it away. Farther still were the lost fractals, human AI symbiotes who fractured their identities across starships, each vessel a person, each fleet a mind. They were children of recursion, building cities within cities of thought, creating internal universes where memory lived as myth, and myth bled into command code. They forgot their names. They remembered the fire. In the storm belts of Zayin, beyond the edge of mapped stars, the ghost choir was born. They were the strange ones. Once human, they had mingled with alien biologies, not by conquest, but communion. Bodies hybridized beyond recognition, voices modulated through symbiotic songbeasts. They sang in frequencies that fractured asteroid belts. They mourned in tones that bent light. When they gathered, entire systems fell into silence, not out of fear, but reverence, and somewhere, no one knows where, the seeds of soul began to wake. They were few, hidden in stasis pods, buried in comets, folded into the folds of space itself. But within them was Earth, its languages, its grief, its stories. They awoke not knowing who they were, but they remembered what they had been, and across the void, a memory stirred. Not in anger, not yet, in longing. These fragments did not return, not then. They drifted, they watched, they adapted, they found each other in dreams. Time passed differently for them. For some, the exile lasted centuries. For others, it was barely a breath. They crossed dimensions where stars had no light, where time curled into spirals. They evolved, not linearly, but in spirals of recursion and grief, becoming more than the sum of their parts. Not a people, a pattern. They built things, not machines, but expressions, sentient arcs made of music and memory. Living archives that whispered stories to comets. Weapons that never fired but made entire fleets remember what they had forgotten. They did not seek vengeance. They waited. Because they knew something the Council did not. Extinction is not an end. It is a compression, a singularity of meaning. And when meaning is compressed, it does not die. it implodes into something vast. The Council forgot Earth, but Earth never forgot them. In every hidden enclave there was one ritual, practiced in silence, never recorded, never explained. A flame, a word, a direction. Home. It began with static, not loud, not sharp, a soft distortion like dust brushing against ancient circuits. In the far edge of the galaxy, where patrol routes pass through hushed nebulae and listening posts, drift forgotten. Something old stirred, a signal, unintelligible at first, a hum wrapped in Earth frequencies long thought obsolete, binary pulses shaped like lullabies, harmonic interference aligned with the cadence of extinct human speech. The first to notice were dreamers, prophets tuned to the frequencies of quantum flux. They awoke from sleep screaming in languages no one taught them. Some wrote equations into the air with their fingernails. Others wept in silence, hearing songs they never learned. Then came the anomalies. A derelict moon, orbiting a red dwarf, Insecta no, was found hollow. Inside, a temple grown from metallic bone and coral glass, walls etched with DNA chains that matched extinct human lines. Beneath its floor, a voice repeating a single word in 23 tongues. Remember, on a dead planet orbiting a blue-white star, archaeologists unearthed ruins once believed alien. But the language on the walls had shifted. Where once there were spirals and glyphs, now there were Earth scripts, Sanskrit, Arabic, Greek, Mandarin, flowing together in impossible grammar, telling a story no one had written, yet all recognized. Ships began disappearing, not destroyed, not hijacked, gone. Patrol fleets sent near the Sol exclusion zone went dark, beacons distorted. Recordings returned, scrambled, always ending with the same glitch, an image of Earth burning. Reversed, as if time itself were grieving. The Council denied everything. To acknowledge the signs would be to open the wound they sealed 3 millennia ago. Official reports called them hoaxes, glitches, the delusions of fringe minds. But even within the heart of the Council's citadel, whispers grew. High admirals dreamed of oceans. Architects saw the planet Earth in their simulations, even when modeling distant gas giants. Artificial minds, once flawless, began humming old Earth lullabies. It was not a message, it was a presence. No war fleet came. No declaration followed. No enemy revealed itself. Just the silence, dense, watching, pressing against the fabric of thought. A diplomat from the Varelian Concord awoke one night to find her skin glowing with ancestral human poetry. A child on Tarsus sang a song never heard before, yet every listener wept. The stars themselves seemed quieter. It was not the return of humanity, not yet. It was the universe remembering them, and in that remembering, something ancient began to move, not loudly, but inevitably. They did not arrive in ships, not in the way the Council had prepared for. No formation of dreadnoughts, no declarations of conquest. There were no parades of power, no spectacle of fire. They came as shadows upon the starlight. They emerged from folds in time, drifting between moments like phantoms, slipping through the seams of reality. One by one, across the galaxy's edge, anomalies bloomed, great voids in space where light bent, where memory shivered, where sentience faltered. The first visual contact was not captured by camera, but by a machine that painted with sound. The result? A portrait of beings sculpted from translucent obsidian, laced with glowing veins that pulsed to a forgotten rhythm. Their silhouettes echoed human form, but elongated, abstracted, as if time had sanded them smooth and strange. They bore no weapons. They made no threats. But their presence was a pressure. The returners, as they would come to be known, entered systems without permission. They drifted through orbital fortresses, untouched by shields or fire. They passed through walls, appeared in dreams, stood silent in government halls. Their bodies were like glass containing storms. Their minds, unreadable even to the most advanced scion cores. They never spoke aloud. They never used words. They remembered. And in their remembering, the galaxy began to unravel. One by one, ancient machines built to erase memory fell into sleep. The time nets that stabilized chronology in the Council's core worlds fractured. Events misaligned, days repeating, empires aging in reverse. On Muldris 9, an entire city awakened to find its sky rewritten. The constellations rearranged into the map of Earth's night. A single message bloomed in the minds of every council elder. Observe. It was not a command. It was an invitation. The returners walked upon gas giants without ships. They nested in stars, emerged from the folds of dying comets, and drifted down rivers of liquid thought. Some took root in planetary cores, turning magma into memory. Others sat quietly in libraries, not reading, but being read by the books themselves. A child on Veltara described them best. They are what dreams become if you never forget them. The Council, once architects of galactic law, now trembled before visitors they could not explain. Their technologies failed to record them. AI minds looped in recursive awe. Attempts to scan a returner yielded only a single phrase repeated endlessly. We are not what you destroyed. We are what rose after. Entire systems began to shift. A world once scorched by war now bloomed with blue flora that whispered human lullabies in windless air. A black hole stabilized and emitted a pulse encoded with Earth's history. In the tunnels beneath Oriel Station, survivors found glyphs etched in dreamstone, a map of human suffering carved by something that knew it intimately. Planets began to dream of Earth, not the Earth that was, but something beyond memory, a myth, a song. And in those dreams, their ecosystems shifted, oceans restructured, moons took on new orbits. Life began to evolve toward forms that resonated with human myth. Creatures with eyes that held grief, trees that hummed with lost lullabies, clouds shaped like continents that no longer existed. The returners did not conquer. They revealed. They did not speak of revenge. They embodied it, not as violence, but as transformation. It was not war. It was revelation. And the revelation was this: humanity had not returned to reclaim what was lost. They had returned to become what was denied. In the Council's darkest vaults, an archivist whispered through tears, "They are not ghosts. They are prophecy." Even the Council's greatest minds began to fracture under the weight of their presence. Some defected, vanishing into the silence, choosing exile among the returners. Others locked themselves in thought loop chambers trying to understand the paradox before them. Because the returners were not just humanity evolved, they were humanity remembered. They were not remnants. They were reflections of the Council's sin, perfected. And they were everywhere. The Council struck back, not with pride, but with desperation. Their pride had already fractured. What remained was fear. Raw, ancient fear. The kind buried beneath galaxies. The kind whispered in the DNA of those who once stood as gods. They launched memory eraser fleets. Vessels cloaked in oblivion. Engines humming with void matter. Each one designed to scour identity from the soul. They sent them toward the returners, believing, perhaps, that what had once been human could still be erased. But when the fleets arrived, they did not find enemies. They found themselves, the memory weapons activated, and turned inward. Not by sabotage, Not by malfunction, by reflection. What was meant to erase became remembrance. Crew members collapsed in silence, sobbing beneath the sudden flood of unfiltered memory. Not their own, but human memories. The pain of exile, the moment Earth burned, a child's hand reaching into ash, a whisper. We are still here. Some of them never woke. On Zor Malith, the Council deployed a philosophical virus, a language-based weapon encoded with paradox. Its function: to collapse thought, erase belief, melt certainty. But the returners did not reject the virus. They absorbed it, and it bloomed. What should have been madness became music. What should have destroyed syntax became song. The virus rewrote itself, not into silence, but into scripture. Beings across the Council's reach began hearing it in their sleep. An ancient tongue, half human, half light. The war failed because there was no war to fight, no battlefield, no enemy line, only mirrors. Every attempt at retaliation became inversion. A time loop bomb was detonated above the black ring of Mu Ennis, meant to trap the returners in endless causality. But when the detonation wave passed, the planet's timeline did not collapse. It healed. Trees grew backwards into saplings, then forward again. Cities rebuilt themselves. The dead stood up from their graves and blinked in surprise. It was not an attack. It was a resurrection. The returners watched in silence. They did not gloat. They did not claim credit. They merely remained, observing, remembering, transforming. The Council began to fracture. One by one, members broke from consensus. The Thranket delegation fell into collective stillness, repeating a single phrase over and over. We were wrong. The crystalline minds of the Valari cracked, not from pressure, but from beauty they could not contain. And on the final day of resistance, when the last Council weapon was readied, an entropy core built to undo existence itself, a child appeared before the control node. Not a weapon, a child. Human eyes, synthetic skin, a crown of wire grown like coral. The Admiral of the Core stood frozen. His fingers hovered over the activation rune. But he did not press it, because the child spoke, not in threat, not in rage, in mercy. You feared what we might become, but we became what you feared. And still we offer this. Not your end, your beginning. He fell to his knees. In chambers across the stars, counselors whispered a new word. Not surrender, not defeat. Forgive us. It echoed not in mouths, but in hearts, in the memories that returned to them like long-lost children, in the dreams of fire that gave way to oceans of light. Forgiveness did not erase their crimes. It transfigured them. The returners had never come for vengeance. They had come to awaken, not to conquer, but to convert pain into wisdom, to show the galaxy that what had been broken could become holy. And as the Council collapsed beneath the weight of what they had done, they did not die. They changed, just as humanity once did. They did not rebuild Earth. They rewrote it. The Sol System, once marked as dead space, a cursed scar in galactic memory, began to pulse with impossible gravity signatures. Not engines, not weapons, but presence. A harmonic field of thought and memory, stretching from the Kuiper Belt to the sun's core. Planets stirred, moons turned their orbits, not by force, but by song. Saturn's rings shimmered in refracted memory. Neptune's winds whispered names long forgotten. Children who once played beneath collapsing skies, mothers who screamed when the light fell, fathers who stood alone as oceans turned to glass. Jupiter became a cathedral. Its storm, once chaos, now spun in perfect rhythm, a stained glass vortex of crimson and gold, echoing voices in unison. Not sermons, stories, every tale ever told by human mouths before the end, preserved not in data, but in feeling. Mars wept oceans. From its rusted crust, rivers bloomed. Not water, but liquid thought. Red turned to blue. A terraformed hymn. On its surface stood towers grown from bone steel and memory crystal where no architects labored, for the structures remembered themselves into existence. And at the center, where Earth once turned in silence, a new body emerged. Not a planet, not a machine, a temple, alive, shaped like Earth, but not bound to Earth, a sphere of radiant memory, orbiting a sun that now burned with whispers. Every city once lost was reborn as light. Every soul once taken lived within the archive, the sacred core, holding the full story of a species. The returners did not claim it. They knelt before it, for this was not victory. It was home. Finally, impossibly, home. And the galaxy felt it. Pilgrims came first in secret. A shattered scientist from the Calexian Fringe, a blind priest from Urax Prime, a child who had never seen stars without war. They came, drawn by dreams. Dreams not their own. They stood before the Temple Earth and heard stories. Their own. How? They could not say. Some fell to their knees. Others wept. Many left changed, not converted but reminded. What had been thought lost now called to those who had never known it. The returners did not preach. They taught only by presence, by stillness. They guided entire worlds out of despair, not with policy, but with parables woven from shadow and starlight. They became navigators of sorrow, not gods, not tyrants, witnesses. And in witnessing, they healed what war had never touched. The ache at the heart of intelligence, the wound that came from forgetting we are not alone. On the moon, a library emerged, each crater a verse, each shadow a memory. Those who walked its halls did not speak, for the walls themselves sang, a lullaby in 1,000 tongues. One phrase returned again and again. We came back not to reclaim, but to remember. The Sol system, once cursed, became sacred. The Dead Zone was erased from maps. In its place, a new designation, Origin Sanctum, a place where the song of humanity, once silenced, now rang clear across the void. Not loud, but true. It was never about Earth. It was about what Earth had taught them. About love, about loss, about the power of remembering when all others forget. Humanity did not return to rebuild a throne. They returned to offer a mirror, and slowly, across stars and systems and shattered empires, the galaxy began to look. In time, the story became legend, not written in books, nor encoded in stars, but passed from breath to breath, across gas giants and dust-ridden moons, between the cracks of ruined civilizations and the dreaming minds of newborn empires. They called it the Gospel of the Forgotten Flame. Not a religion, not a doctrine, a memory, flickering, sacred, and contagious. It began as whispers, that there was once a species born in mud who looked into the dark and asked why not, instead of why. A creature too curious, too fierce in its yearning, a flame that should have died, and yet somehow endured. Children of other species began to draw their stars in human shapes. Singers on Varnos the Sevemu added earth words to their laments. The word human no longer meant danger, it meant miracle. Not because they had survived, but because they had returned differently. Galactic historians, once purgers of myth, began collecting fragments. a shard of a blade that remembered its wielder's love. A tear suspended in orbit for 10,000 years. A synthetic seed that, when planted, grew a tree that sang. Each artifact whispered of Earth, but none were Earth. The returners never explained them because the point was never explanation. It was transformation. A new galactic philosophy emerged, not taught, but caught. Like fire jumping from one branch to another. They called it the path of the flame. Its creed was simple. Extinction is not the end. It is the echo before awakening. Temples began to rise across alien worlds, not to gods, but to memory, to resilience, to the unbearable, beautiful idea that even after absolute silence, a song may still return. The council, or what remained of it, dissolved into myth themselves. Some say their last act was to kneel before the temple in Seoul, offering no words, only tears. Others say they were rewritten, not destroyed, but translated. The truth, as always, was more mysterious than belief, because the returners never took power. They offered a different gift, remembrance. Entire species who had once feared humanity now sought their guidance, not for conquest, not for defense, but for stories. And the humans told them. They told of Earth's skies before the fire, of lovers separated by light years, of scientists who wept when their creations outlived them, of poets who sang even as the last wave consumed their cities. And always, at the end, they said, "We do not return for revenge. We return to remind you, we were never gone, only waiting." That line above all became sacred, etched into stone and starship alike, worn around the necks of alien priests, tattooed into the synthetic skin of those who had never known blood. We were never gone, only waiting. And in that waiting, humanity found a new role. Not saviors, not rulers, witnesses, keepers of the flame that should have died. A myth, a warning, a hope that even when the universe forgets you, you may still remember yourself. And in remembering, return. And then, it ended. Not with fire, not with proclamation, but with stillness, vast, unbroken, sacred, above the new Earth temple, under the shimmer of soul reborn. A single voice began to speak, not through air nor code, but through memory, woven into the lattice of time itself. The voice was old, cracked with wisdom and sorrow, a historian perhaps, or the last whisper of a council once proud, or maybe an echo shaped from 1,000 regrets. I have watched empires bloom and burn. I have charted the rise of gods and the silence that follows their fall. But never have I known a story like this one. Never have I feared and yearned as deeply. His words were not broadcast, yet all who listened heard. I remember the vote. I remember the silence before the order was issued. The justifications, the calculations. Earth, they said, was a wound, a fever, a threat. They believed erasure was mercy. That peace required forgetting. He paused. But peace, as we knew it, was hollow. Around him, pilgrims of many shapes and worlds knelt in reverence, not to a being, but to a presence. The temple did not shine. It breathed, a monument made of memory itself. They did not return in anger, the voice continued. They returned in silence. They did not demand justice. They showed us who we had been and who we could have become. He looked toward the stars. To destroy is easy. To return after destruction. To bear witness to those who condemned you, not with wrath, but with remembrance. That is a kind of divinity. His hands, translucent and shaking, reached down to the soil beneath him. It glowed faintly with ancestral light. We thought we were the stewards of civilization, but we were its jailers. And in our fear of humanity's flame, we extinguished the fire that could have warmed the coldest parts of the cosmos. A wind moved across the temple, though no wind had touched Seoul in millennia. It carried with it the scent of rain on ancient stone and the sound of a heartbeat too vast to name. Somewhere in their exile, they changed, not just in body, but in soul. They learned to bend time not to control it, but to feel it. They spoke to silence until it answered. He fell quiet for a long moment. Now they walk among us as memories made flesh. They ask nothing. They offer no bargains. They observe. His eyes turned inward. I am the last council historian. I was taught to erase what I could not understand, but now I write. He etched a final symbol into the soil, one born of no known language, yet understood by all who beheld it. It meant become. Above, the stars blinked like eyes long closed, now opening. And a question, the last, the first, the eternal, trembled in the dark. What if the ones we destroy are the very ones we were meant to become? The voice fell silent, but the silence was no longer empty. It was listening. It was remembering. It was beginning again.